And we're back on Todd Schowalter, along with my buddy Joey V. And on the line now is John Sitilides. Did I say your name right, John? Is how you say it?
Sitilides. You said it perfectly, Todd. Thank you.
Well, you're a geopolitical strategy specialist, and that's a big mouthful right there. But just jump into it. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Essentially, I provide open source intelligence to my clients, mostly in finance and industrial leadership positions in North America, on many of the challenges that face the American economy, the American military, and our overall national well-being in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, and with a number of critical functional markets like energy, Todd. And especially with the disorder that we've seen around the world in the last half decade, this is an area that's become very high demand, high stakes, and high value throughout the country. And increasingly, we're seeing even with our fellow allies in Asia and in Europe.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said the last half decade, so that covers what I was going to bring up. I mean, things have not gone well, to put it lightly, during the Biden administration. And from a foreign policy standpoint, how do you think things are going to change now that we have the good guy back in, or coming in, I should say?
I see significant changes in almost every major arena of international engagement. And we can talk about Europe first and the Ukraine war, especially now that there is apparently a leak. I don't know how credible it is about Trump's plan to engage Putin and Zelensky to bring about a ceasefire to Ukraine. Certainly in terms of our relationship with China, the single most important relationship the United States will have in the years to come. And of course, with the opportunity to hopefully try to constrain the expansion of the Middle East and to prevent a wider war that could draw in the U.S. against Iran directly.
Yeah, well, I mean, what is it that you think? I mean, it seems to me what we have going now. You don't have. It doesn't seem like they're even trying. I mean, when you try to, you have Trump coming out saying how he could have this all done within a phone call or something like that. If it's that, I'm not saying easy, and he does obviously carry a lot more weight. But why do you think we're in the situation now? Is there anything nefarious going on? Is there a reason why all these, hostile areas have popped up and nothing's been resolved? Why that couldn't have been done like Trump says he's going to do on a phone call?
My concern, Todd, has been that under the last 4 years, we've largely seen the elimination of American deterrence on the world stage, sending signals to foes and adversaries that it will be far riskier and more painful for them to undertake activities against other countries or against the U.S. or our allies and assets and partners than would otherwise be the case. Most people point to the humiliating abandonment of Afghanistan in the summer of 2021, sort of the first signal that America would not stand by its commitments and its allies and partners. And that was kind of the signal to Putin that he could move into Ukraine several months later. But I would rather, Todd, go back several months to the very beginning of the Biden administration when Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and our National Security Advisor under Joe Biden, Jake Sullivan, met with their Chinese counterparts in Alaska to sort of open up a new, quote unquote, a new era in U.S.-China relations. And they got a drumming, beating down, rhetorical torrent from their Chinese counterparts about how America had no standing to offer any type of lecture or lessons to China, that we were a racist country that was decaying from within and the like. And they did not get a very strong retort or response from Blinken or from Sullivan. And I think that sent a diplomatic signal to China that we would be willing to be far more accommodating and not willing to push back against Chinese belligerence, rhetorical or otherwise. That was then followed several months later by the humiliation in Afghanistan. And then, of course, when Joe Biden said in December of 2021 that a minor Russian incursion into Ukraine would not draw any major U.S. response, these were all signals to Russia, to China, and to our adversaries that we were withdrawing from the international arena in terms of our military deterrence capabilities, and that we were opening the pathway for our adversaries to undertake far more belligerent operations against their neighbors.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I'll be honest with you. One of the biggest things that I'm most excited about with the Trump win is that I sincerely believe that if Kamala Harris was able to pull this off, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but I think there would have been World War III. I mean, I think that weakness would have gone on. I think that there would be more. I think Putin would have gotten a lot more aggressive. I don't know what China would have done with Taiwan. I mean, I think it could really have everything could have fallen out of place. And I seriously, I'm a father. I breathed a sigh of relief thinking, maybe we have avoided something like that. But what are your thoughts?
Well, Todd, I'm also a father of 4 young men, and so I'm very concerned about the future. And I think almost all Americans, I'd like to think, want us to see a world that is more at peace, more prosperous, and focused on things that we want to pass on to the next generation, to our children and our grandchildren. I don't know if the World War III concerns were somewhat over dramatic, although we could get there if we do see a crisis between China and Taiwan. And I think we need to be very careful. And this is where I give President-elect Trump great credit. He's made very clear he has no intention of drawing China into a war over Taiwan, especially because Taiwan does not seem to be ready to defend itself yet against the colossal Chinese military and economy. And Joe Biden, you'll recall 3 times when asked by reporters if the U.S. would automatically and immediately come to Taiwan's defense in the event of a Chinese invasion, said, yes, we would. That was a violation of our long-standing understanding with the People's Republic of China that our position is no unilateral declaration of independence. Of course, we also want to see no Chinese invasion of Taiwan, that there be a peaceful resolution of that dispute between the 2 entities. But every time Joe Biden said we would come to Taiwan's defense, White House staff had to walk back his statement and basically tell the public, the media, and of course the Chinese and our adversaries around the world that the president's statements do not reflect U.S. policy. Think about that.
No,
for
I know.
Second.
You're exactly right, and that goes back to what we were talking about. Now, do you think could that just be negligence, or could it be something again more nefarious? Because I understand. He's never been the sharpest knife in the drawer, but at the same time, you had to think with advisors and different people to say, hey, before you go out there and spout this off, we're not going to do this. I mean, why? How could it have even put us in that kind of a situation to begin with?
I can't read Joe Biden's mind. I have no idea why he would say what he said. But look, along the same lines, we have former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who several months ago gave a speech here in Washington, D.C., and called on the United States to officially recognize Taiwan as an independent nation state. If you want war with China, that's how you do it. It's the same way that we kept pushing Ukraine as a NATO ally when Vladimir Putin made very clear since 2007 in public speech after public speech, we have one red line with NATO. No Ukraine membership. And we kept pushing the envelope. And a few days before the invasion by Russia of Ukraine in February of 2022, Kamala Harris, as vice president, said, yes, we fully support Ukraine's membership in NATO. 5 days later, the Russian tanks rolled in and we were unable to stop them. So we need to be very careful about how we're dealing with these adversaries that do have great influence in their parts of the world. And I think what you'll see under a Trump administration, Todd, is not so much a capitulation to these adversaries, but a recognition of geopolitical reality. Russia is a far larger and more powerful country than Ukraine. Ukraine is not going to defeat Russia in a war. Ukraine's already been destroyed largely. It's going to cost $500 billion to ever rebuild that country. It'll take decades to do so. The European Union doesn't have $500 billion. The U.S. does not have $500 billion. The Chinese may, but do we really want China rebuilding Ukraine in the heart of Europe? So we need to think about the second and third order consequences of these types of positions that we've taken in the past. And that's why I think a Trump realism can help bring about a balance of power in Europe, in the Middle East, and in Asia, and bring about a greater equilibrium like we had before 2021.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then going back to Ukraine, I mean, you hit it on the head there. I mean, there is no way they're ever going to defeat Russia. And to be throwing billions of dollars into a losing battle, to me, just I thought, even a kid on the street would think, what the heck are they doing? I mean, it just didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And so, again, that's just another reason why I'm glad we're going to be moving in the direction that we are. Now, you brought up something about energy and how that's going to be a factor. Go explain that a little bit.
Well, I think energy is going to be a very important factor in our relations with all of the major powers, because one looks, first of all, at how Europe has learned a very difficult lesson that you do not become dependent for your economic and military and social well-being on a hostile authoritarian regime, as in Moscow. And so when Russia invaded Ukraine, and then we had the cutoff of Russian oil and gas to Europe, this became a very, very difficult proposition for a number of countries that have their own energy resources, such as the United Kingdom, sitting on huge shale gas reserves. But because of this ideological commitment to net zero carbon emissions by these artificially constructed target years of 2035 and 2050. I mean, Todd, do you ever notice how these target years always end in 0 or 5?
Right. Yeah.
The laws of physics and the laws of economics don't care about politicians' targets. And so Europe let itself become completely dependent on Russia. They went through very, very scary situations the past several winters, and it was American liquefied natural gas shipments across the Atlantic that saved the European Union societies over the last several winters. So they're very fortunate that we're resilient. We are the greatest producers of oil and natural gas in the world, and therefore the greatest exporters of oil and natural gas. And I think now, when we're looking at what's happening in technology, Todd, with the advent of artificial intelligence, Bitcoin mining, cryptocurrency, the need for data centers, there's going to be skyrocketing demand for electricity that weather-dependent, unreliable, intermittent solar and wind simply cannot provide. And we also need to be very mindful that solar panels and wind turbines in the global markets are essentially dominated by Chinese firms. Mm-hmm. So why would we in North America, the U.S. and our Canadian neighbors, and our allies in the European Union willingly become dependent on the Communist Party of China for solar farms and wind turbines under hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer subsidies for intermittent, unreliable energy? We see it in Europe now, where Germany, the economic powerhouse of the European Union, is deindustrializing before our very eyes and exporting factories and laying off tens of thousands of industrial workers because energy is unaffordable in Germany today.
Yeah, and going even back to a lot of that, I mean, one of the first things that Trump did in his speech the other night is he said we're going to be the party of common sense. I think going back to all of this green, I'm all for. Look, I would love, I want the planet to be, a healthy, clean place. But a lot of these things that you mentioned with the timelines and things like that, from a common sense standpoint, you got to look at this stuff and say, come on. I mean, look, unless everybody gets on board, unless all these pieces fall into place, this isn't going to happen. And in the meantime, we're cutting our noses off. You mentioned, in Europe, they could have frozen to death. Why? What is it so hard? And I'm really hoping things change here quickly. Why? What is it? Why cannot people just not see that?
Because a lot of this eco-radicalism has become almost like a religious cult, right? I mean, if one simply looks at the data, Todd, right, we talk about an energy transition. And if transition means that we're layering new forms of energy on top of existing scalable, affordable, reliable energy like oil and natural gas and nuclear energy, that's fine. But if by transition somebody thinks that we're going to be substituting or replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy anytime in the next several decades, that is utterly utopian and delusional. Look at what's happening in China. They're building a new coal plant every week. Mm-hmm. They're going to build 130 nuclear plants between now and 2035. The Chinese and the Indians, looking to develop their economies, are putting more carbon into the atmosphere than we're saving here in the United States and in Europe with this ideological commitment to green energy. So yes, maybe in in 2072 or 2093 we'll be more dependent on renewable energy forms or even new breakthrough technologies that we're not aware of today. But even the Biden administration, Todd, in 2022 predicted that in 2050, oil and natural gas will still provide for 3/4 of overall energy consumption in the United States. So why are we spending $350 billion, maybe hundreds of billions more in tax credits and subsidies for solar and wind when we have all of this abundant fossil fuel and potential nuclear energy to make us even more energy independent and resilient in the years to come?
Exactly right. And again, it comes down to common sense. And I don't know if their party doesn't have any common sense or everybody behind all these green initiatives and things like that. John Kerry, I mean, don't get me going on him. I mean, it's like there's just they're immune to logic, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. Well, we're down to our last couple of minutes. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you help others, and also what do you think? I mean, from a time we're talking timelines here. What do you think? What can we expect in the first year or so of Trump's presidency? New one.
Yeah, great question. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing the first hints of what a possible Ukraine ceasefire might look like. I don't think it's going to be the end result, but he's sending out feelers first to Putin saying, we're going to continue arming Ukraine and providing for Ukraine's self-defense. But Russia will largely keep most of the land that it is occupied because there's no realistic scenario under which the Ukrainian army wins that land back. No NATO membership for Ukraine for 20 years, and Europe pays for a demilitarized zone and sends its soldiers there because this is central to Europe's security, not America's. We're not threatened directly by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is a European security problem. They pay for the deployment of European soldiers to man a demilitarized zone. And we'll see if this is the beginning of some type of an arrangement between Putin and Zelensky. And I think Trump would like to have this issue resolved before he's inaugurated. So the Ukraine issue is off the map for him. With the Middle East, I think you're going to see a restoration of maximum sanctions against the Iranian regime. It worked in 2018, 2019, 2020. He starved the Iranian government of the ability to sponsor international terrorism and to fund these proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis that threaten not only Israel, but have now cut off global shipping in the Red Sea. 10 to 15% of global shipping has been cut off, and no one is doing anything about it because we're too afraid to go full on against the Houthis to open up those shipping lanes again. And then I think with Asia, that's going to be the axis around which strategic relations will develop and emerge in the years to come, Todd. I think Xi Jinping lost the trust of Donald Trump when they let the COVID virus spread around the world after they knew that it infected their population in Wuhan, and they encouraged Chinese people to travel around the world from Wuhan while they protected the rest of their country. I think it's going to be a much tougher policy towards China on trade, on technology. Jake Sullivan spoke about a small yard with a high fence in terms of protecting our advanced technology. I think we're going to expand the technologies that we're going to deny the Chinese so that we slow down their economic and technological prowess. And I think ultimately we're going to see a very strong deterrent capability with the U.S., Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, and our allies like Australia and New Zealand sending very strong signals to China. Take these kinds of military operations in the Indo-Pacific at your own risk. But we are back with our allies, and we have to constrain the Communist Party of China, which thinks it's going to dominate the Asian economy and therefore half of the global economy because of the lack of American deterrence that they experienced under the last several years.
It's a lot to take in. Overall, though, I think it's going to be a safer world. What do you think?
I think we're going to be moving in the right direction because we're going to be demonstrating American strength, American vigilance, American deterrence. And I think toughness, and here's what's very interesting, the unpredictability of Donald Trump, kind of like a Nixon strategy, that he's so crazy that our adversaries can't predict what he's going to do. And that is a great way to constrain their belligerence and their willingness to take risks. They can't predict what Trump will do, whereas their prediction was that Biden would pretty much step aside and let them do whatever they're doing, because under Biden, our primary objective was de-escalation. De-escalation means you're not willing to make it risky for an adversary to take steps. That gives them the greater freedom to operate and to conduct malignant operations against our allies and our interests.
Okay. A lot of great stuff. A lot of stuff to think about. You've been fantastic to talk with. I hope you'll join us again. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Sitilides.com. And thank you so much, Todd, for giving me the opportunity to share my insights and perspectives with you and your audience.
Well, there's a lot more I'd like to talk with you about if we have the time, but we'll do it again in the near future. How's that sound?
You got it.
Okay.
We'll do it again. Call anytime.
Thank you so much. Thanks, John.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.